What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith as we start to digest almost all of Wild Card Weekend. When we're recording this, the Monday night game between the Rams and the Vikings has yet to take place. But, Coach, what's going on?
What's going on, Jeff? I see the terrible towel hanging behind you.
Yeah.
You haven't lit it on fire or used it to clean your shoes or anything. That's a step in the right direction.
I've been through worse seasons. We'll put it that way. It's bad, but you and I both have been through way worse as Steelers fans. This towel does not come down. It's going to remain there no matter what. As much as I would love to just purge myself of all things black and gold, I can't. I just can't do it. It's part of my DNA. But I think the question I have for you, Coach, and this is going to lead into our first topic, which is which NFL team had the most impressive win of Wild Card Weekend. I want to ask you, and this has kind of been a trend in the NFL since they expanded to 7 teams per conference. Has Wild Card Weekend become a dud? Have the games been even close to competitive? So, I mean, when you look at the final scores of the game so far, Saturday, the first game, Texans 32, Chargers 12. It was close early, but then we know how it finished. Ravens 28-14. That is way closer than how close the game was. It wasn't even close. Then you have Bills 31-7 over the Broncos, Packers 22-10, or Eagles over the Packers 22-10. And then the Commanders and Buccaneers last night was a very, very good game. But is Wild Card Weekend a little bit of a dud, in your opinion?
I think right now you have a clear separation in both conferences between the teams that have legitimate chances to win it all and the teams that don't. And what you saw in those 2 versus 7 and 3 versus 6 games was the real contenders: Buffalo, Baltimore in the AFC, Philly in the NFC. They did what they should have done at home against clearly weaker opponents. Now the 4-5 game in the NFC was great. And that was or I should say that was the 3-6 game, Tampa and Washington, but those were 2 equally matched teams. I suspect tonight's game is going to be a really good one or Monday night's game between Minnesota and LA. So is it a dud? I don't know. I just think that the way things are sort of structured right now is that you've got an upper echelon of 5 or 6 teams who could win the whole thing right now, and then a big separation between the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it's still intriguing and people are still going to watch. And I'm not about to suggest that the NFL should change anything that they're doing. I think adding playoff teams is only going to help the product, but you are going to have these matchups where it's the haves and the have-nots. And that this year in particular, I feel like the parity in the National Football League, they always say any given Sunday. I didn't feel like that this season. I felt like there were more foregone conclusions than there were, wow, that team came out of nowhere. Would you agree or disagree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that the league this year went pretty much to script. The Commanders were a good story.
Yep.
They may have snuck up onto people. They were a little bit better than you thought they might be. The Chargers went from 5-12 to 11-6, so they made a significant improvement, but they didn't have a ceiling as high as some of the elite teams. We knew going into the season that teams like Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, Philly, Detroit, they'd be the contenders. Minnesota is probably the most surprising story of the season.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Well, let's talk about the most impressive wins so far of Wild Card Weekend. I just rattled off the teams that were victorious. You had, again, the Texans, Chargers, which I was actually very intrigued by this game because the Chargers were dominating early. They were only up 6-0 though. And then, the play that broke the camel's back was that broken play where it was a 3rd down, I believe, in their own end, and C.J. Stroud, the snap goes over his head. He picks it up and actually is able to complete like a 35-yard pass downfield to Nico Collins. Everything changed after that, but still, the Texans win, the Ravens win, the Bills win, Eagles win, and the Commanders over the Buccaneers. Which was the most impressive win to you, Coach?
You're not going to like what I'm about to talk about here, Jeff.
I know.
I was really impressed with the Ravens. I hate to say it, but they've got that offense right now exactly where it needs to be, where the 2-headed monster of Jackson and Henry are forcing defenses to make some tough decisions. So Baltimore ran the zone read play or the read option play against Pittsburgh, like they invented the damn thing. And the Steelers look like they've never seen it before. But that's a little bit unfair to Pittsburgh, because what Baltimore was doing was they essentially were forcing Pittsburgh to make a choice: defend the inside run with Henry or the edge run with Jackson. And Pittsburgh just wasn't athletic enough to be able to do it. And Baltimore just really was able to kind of dictate to the Steelers that entire game, when the Ravens had the ball, how those possessions were going to go. And Pittsburgh didn't have any answers. Now, that's partly a condemnation of the Steelers, who played a terrible football game and looked unenthusiastic in doing so. But I think part of the reason for that was because Baltimore was so good. If Baltimore can run the ball with any sort of semblance to what they did against Pittsburgh, my God, they had 300 rushing yards until Lamar Jackson took a knee on the final play. They're going to be tough to beat. I think they got it going on right now.
It's hard to disagree. You hear terms used all the time. And one of the terms, like, in coaching circles, is the team is buttoned up. Everything, they look good. Like, everything is where it should be in terms of playing your best football at the right time. The Ravens look buttoned up. Everything about their game looks really, really good. Buffalo's win. I like teams that can kind of overcome some adversity. That game was close early as well with Denver. And Denver, I believe, had the lead early in that game at one point. And they just came storming back, doing what you expected them to do. But I can't say that a team was more impressive than watching Jaden Daniels and the Commanders and the way they won that game. Because, again, you talk about the Commanders and their up and down season, and every game feels like it's an up and down game for them. But Jaden Daniels he just seems so calm and so poised. And they're just starting to get some of their pieces back, like Austin Eckler coming back. They're able to do some 2 running back sets, and they're able to do some things they hadn't been able to do for a while. And I was really impressed with the Commanders 23-20, whether they win next week or not. This team won 4 games last year, Coach Dan Quinn. Not getting enough credit, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Jaden Daniels, he's like he's having fun as he's doing it.
Yeah.
He's out there smiling, and he's like joking around with the opposing defense. I mean, he's a guy you want to put your biggest lick possible on the dude, but then he just kind of bounces back up. Did you see the play where he got hit on the sideline? He went airborne. Yeah. Airborne, right? There's another play where he comes out, he's got a big gash on his cheek, and he's just kind of laughing and smiling through all of it. Yeah. He's a special talent, man. He's not Lamar Jackson. I don't like to make parallels like that, but there are Lamar Jackson elements to his game, and we forget he's a rookie.
Yeah, he's not the athlete of Lamar Jackson,
right.
But I think at this stage in his career, he's a much better quarterback in terms of throwing, reading the field. Lamar's made strides in that area, and he's a veteran now. But I think Jaden Daniels, where he is now, is much further along than Lamar was. So I'm going to go with the Commanders for my most impressive win of wildcard weekend so far. Anything else stick out to you from the weekend?
I just thought Houston did a nice job to sort of change the narrative on their season. Their ending of the regular season wasn't very good. And like you said, man, that game turned quickly in their favor.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like the typical, hey, the home team gets the momentum, the crowd gets behind them, and they're able now to sort of put away their opponent. I mean, this is 2 really disappointing playoff games in a row now for Justin Herbert. If you think back a couple of years, they had the bad loss in Jacksonville where they had the huge halftime lead that they gave up. And this one, he winds up throwing 4 interceptions. And they weren't all his fault, but still, that's something that obviously he's still a young quarterback. He's a great quarterback. He's got time, but he's going to have to sort of turn around the playoff narrative on him before it begins to define his career.
Now, he's not the player profile, but I do want to give him some props. Ladd McConkey, like this guy. I mean, who's a comp that you could think of? Is he like a Wes Welker type? Is he a Julian? Like, who would you comp Ladd McConkey to? Because he's a really good young receiver. He set a record for most receiving yards in a postseason game as a rookie, I think.
Yeah, he's built like those guys. He reminds you of those guys. He can play outside too a little more than they did. He just looked like the kind of guy that coming into the league, he was a pro's pro. Yeah. And like a Cooper Kupp kind of guy, because he's willing to block as well. He comes out of that Georgia system where the receivers are tough. So he's going to be a special guy for sure.
You love your receivers that block, that's for sure.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go to all right, we got to talk about it. Like the Roberto Steeler fans, we got to talk about it. This topic number 2 is another disappointing playoff loss for Pittsburgh. It makes 6 postseason losses in a row now. They haven't been competitive in any of them. Pittsburgh has been outscored 73-0 in the first quarter of those games and has trailed by at least 21 points in all 6. What do you do moving forward if you are the Steelers?
I don't know. There's not an easy answer to this, Jeff.
No,
this is not. You and I have both written articles for the Steel Curtain Network, sort of talking about this. What next? Yeah. And it's not easy. The recipe right now for success in the NFL seems to be to marry a top level quarterback with a top level coaching staff. Do the Pittsburgh Steelers have that? No.
No and no.
No and no. No and no. And moving forward, it's not like there's a young Ben Roethlisberger just waiting to be plucked. They don't have a signed quarterback. They can bring back one of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. I'm a proponent of bringing back Justin Fields. I think the Russell Wilson ship has sailed. We know his ceiling. We know where he can get a team right now. That's not where the Steelers want to go. There's not an easy answer in free agency. Maybe you can go after Sam Darnold, but if not Sam Darnold, there are no available quarterbacks who excite you. Maybe you could pry somebody loose in a trade. What would that cost you? Getting their next quarterback is not going to be easy. And then you got to ask the questions about the coaching staff. Mike Tomlin's going to come back, but you got 2 coordinators who had questionable seasons. One or both may be gone. Then what? For a franchise that loves stability, this is an awful lot of uncertainty as they head into the offseason. Mike Tomlin likes to say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, that needs to apply to the entire franchise right now. They need to make some uncomfortable decisions.
So, I mean, we don't have enough time on this in this segment to really digest this. But the one thing I'll say, everything that you said is factual, 100%. But the biggest problem, or should I say the biggest question mark, is the man that everyone wants gone, and that's Mike Tomlin. And I'll tell you why. So let's say they fire Terrell Austin. I think they should. But if Mike Tomlin is the one pulling the strings on that defense, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they get rid of Terrell Austin. It's going to be the same old thing because they're just going to run Mike Tomlin's scheme. Offensively, you could get rid of Arthur Smith. I'd be fine if they did, especially if they want to bring back Justin Fields, because I think you need a coordinator that's going to be able to accentuate what he does well and almost have like a Ravens style of offense implemented. Arthur Smith is not that guy. But if you have Mike Tomlin basically neutering the coordinator and saying, just don't turn it over, play it safe, we'll win by takeaways in defense, it's not going to work. And so unless Art Rooney II, the owner of the Steelers, the majority owner of the Steelers, there's minority owners, unless he says, Mike, I need you as like a CEO. You're a great motivator, but you got to let your coaches coach. I don't think it matters either way. But I will say this, you talk about Sam Darnold, like prying him away. Sam Darnold is the perfect example of it depends on where you go and whether you're successful. If Sam Darnold comes to Pittsburgh with Arthur Smith, he's probably going to suck again. He was great with Kevin O'Connell. He's great in that offensive system. He's great with those receivers. The Steelers don't have any of that. The issue is, how is Mike Tomlin going to be able to handle a staff? The way we've seen it the last, 10 years plus probably, has been, it seems like his fingers are his fingerprints are all over the team, and they shouldn't be. If you're not going to get rid of Mike Tomlin, parameters have to be set, because if I'm a coordinator, why would I want to go there? Why would I want to go and put up with that? I don't want to be a part of that. I'd rather go somewhere where I have the freedom to do what I do and how I coach. And I don't know if Mike Tomlin is ready or willing to let go of those reins. That's a long, that I could go on and on and on, Coach. We didn't even talk about players. I think the issue is Tomlin. He's not going anywhere. I agree. But some things have to change, and I think both coordinators should be gone. I'd also love to see Pat Meyer fired too, but that's just me.
One name for you, Jeff. Aaron Rodgers.
Gosh.
I mean,
you're probably you're not. No, you're not. I guarantee you.
I am, but you're right. There are going to be people who probably would make that argument.
I mean, is Aaron Rodgers? I don't know. This team is not a quarterback away. I even said on a podcast on Monday morning, and I'm starting the article series at SteelCurtainNetwork.com, that for me, I'm taking trade offers for even the elite of the elite on the roster. TJ Watt's in his prime. Minkah Fitzpatrick's in his prime. What are you going to give me? You want TJ Watt? Okay. It's going to take some ones, some first round picks, but I'm listening. If I'm Omar Khan, I'm listening because if they're doing this rebuild thing and they haven't found their quarterback in the 2025 draft class, some are comparing it to 2022. We've been down that road before. Let's not draft a quarterback when no one else is. So try and get Justin Fields for a few years, but you got to build this thing up from the ground up. And I think that some parts are being built that way. But with TJ Watt, if you could get draft capital, I'm going to entertain it. Would you agree or disagree?
Agree. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Step outside of your comfort zone. Bring in an offensive coordinator who embraces football in the 2020s. Bring in, you draft for some speed on the perimeter. When's the last time the Steelers drafted real speed on the perimeter? I'm not talking about 40 speed. I'm talking about guys who play fast. They don't have dudes who play fast. We don't have the time right now to go into all of this. You are correct. But it is time to really, really rethink the entire operation.
I think I'm going to have you on my Let's Ride podcast again. We'll just dive into it. Okay, let's go to our next topic. Baltimore plays at Buffalo next weekend in a matchup of teams who have also come up short in recent playoff postseasons. Who would a win in this game mean more to, Lamar Jackson of the Ravens or Josh Allen of the Bills? I think this is going to be a fantastic football game. I'm really looking forward to this one. But who is this more important to, Coach?
Right. This is a tough question because both these guys, as great as they are, have fallen short of where they want to be. For me, though, this is Lamar Jackson's year, man. He's being talked about as though he might win the MVP again. I think I gave this stat recently. If Lamar Jackson were to win the MVP award and not get to the Super Bowl, he'd become the first guy in league history to win it 3 times without ever having gotten to the Super Bowl. Quarterbacks are largely judged by their success in the team realm. Statistics are great, but at the end of the day, you want to be remembered as one of the all-timers, you got to win the Super Bowl. You at least got to get to the Super Bowl because that's really the standard for quarterbacks. And I know Josh Allen is in the same boat, but he hasn't had the personal accolades that Lamar Jackson has had. I think ultimately, if Lamar Jackson's career resume is a whole bunch of personal hardware and no team hardware, then it's viewed as a disappointment.
It's tough when you think about it. And as you just talked about Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen doesn't have the individual accolades that Lamar does or could be getting. But I feel like the same pressure's on him that's on Lamar Jackson. Buffalo Bills fans are like, okay, like we have this franchise quarterback. They went through a lot of change and turnover in the offseason. Stephon Diggs gets shipped out, and they have to make a lot of tough decisions because of the salary cap. And here they are. They're in the divisional round. But again, you can feel that pressure being put on Josh Allen. I agree with you, though. I think that out of the both, Lamar Jackson's the guy that because of the individual accolades, and I'm good friends with a season ticket holder of the Baltimore Ravens. And he openly said when Lamar Jackson wanted a new contract, he said, I wouldn't pay him. He said, we're not paying people for MVPs. We're paying for Super Bowl victories. And he always went back to Joe Flacco, bet on himself. He won a Super Bowl. He was the MVP of the playoffs, and he cashed in. He said, I will pay a king's ransom if you win a Super Bowl. And he just doesn't know, even to this day, if Lamar Jackson has the capabilities and the wherewithal to actually win a Super Bowl. He looked pretty darn good in the wild card round, but the wild card round's not the divisional and the AFC championship game. So for me, I'm going to go with Lamar. I think that this game, if they go to Buffalo and lose, man, that would be a really disappointing defeat for the Ravens, who have won 6 in a row now. Who you get Derrick Henry. You think that you got everything figured out. Now, their defense has had their ups and downs, but I still think that Lamar Jackson, he's got to win this one. He's got to get back to the AFC Championship game. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. What else do you think about in the divisional round, Coach? If we take a quick look ahead, is there any other games that are intriguing? Clearly, we don't know the NFC side of the docket, but we do know the Texans are going to the Chiefs at Arrowhead in the divisional round. What's your thoughts on those?
I think the Chiefs will. I don't want to say they're going to roll them, but I think that that's a very favorable matchup for the Chiefs. I think that Houston will have a hard time putting Kansas City out of their comfort zone. I think that the Chiefs they've played enough over the years, those two teams. You give Andy Reid now a couple of weeks to get ready. The players have been rested. You and I talked about this last week with some teams. When you rest them in the final week of the regular season and then you get the bye and you have this 3-week gap between meaningful play, that would be an issue. But the Chiefs are so experienced and such a veteran team that I don't see any drop off. The game I think will be really interesting will be Washington going up to Detroit because they played earlier. It was a shootout type game. That Washington offense is potent. And if you want to beat Detroit, you got to score points. You're not going to beat Detroit in a 20-17 game. You're going to have to score 28, 30 points to do it. And Washington can. So I think that's a pretty tough matchup for the Lions, even though the alternative probably would have been to get the Vikings again. They're going to be challenged by the Commanders.
The Commanders, though, Dan Quinn made some very questionable decisions in that game against the Buccaneers where, again, super aggressive, and it didn't always pay out. And I'm thinking this is the same thing the Vikings did against Detroit, where they left points out there. And I loved your Call Sheet Daily podcast where you talked about the aggressive nature of the tendencies in the NFL and how it's changed so much. In a game like that in the divisional round, the Commanders, you got to take the points sometimes. Okay. Like I know that you want to be aggressive. You know, Dan Campbell's going to be aggressive, but sometimes you got to take the points. I don't know. Did you watch the Commanders game? Were you thinking the same thing when he was passing up points?
I'm baffled by it, man. These guys are leaving like points on the field like they're just like shells on the beach, and you're just kind of whatever. I mean, this is valuable stuff. But again, I know it's a new reality. It's our Tuesday podcast on the Call Sheet Daily is called The New Normal, and we just like look at the new trends in the game, and that's what we did last week. It's just to people who are a little older like myself, the notion of passing up points, not on 4th and 1, by the way. Like these aren't all 4th and 1. You got teams in field goal range going for it on 4th and 4, where like the numbers show that the success rate is about 43%. I'm just like, what? For 43%, I'm not passing up 3 points.
Well, I will say this. This is a quick aside here before we go to our next topic. I'm okay with a coach like Dan Campbell or even Dan Quinn. They are aggressive 100% of the time. They're never going to second guess themselves. You know what you're going to get. Unlike, we'll use Mike Tomlin as an example. You know, he has 4th and inches with Justin Fields standing on the sideline who could come in and do a quarterback sneak and probably 9 out of 10 times is going to pick it up easily. And he punts. And then he goes, but then he gets aggressive later in the game. It's like, well, are you aggressive or are you safe? And I know that there's different situations call for different decisions, but I'm almost for the coaches that say we are going to be aggressive 100% of the time. And we're not going to lean on the analytics. We're just always going to go that way. We're always going to lean in that direction. I guess for me as a fan, that's what I hope. As a coach, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you have to know who you are.
Yeah.
Because that sets the tone for how you prepare. Like when the Lions are preparing, they know that when we cross midfield, it's 4 down territory. Sometimes you don't even have to be across midfield for them to say it's 4 down territory. When you don't know, when this time we're going for it and that time we're punting and then the third time we're going for it again, that can be tough on the players because 4th downs as much as anything else are a mindset. Like you don't want to. That's not a down where you just like want to dip your toe in the water. I mean, you're diving in on that one. But if you don't have a dive in preset mentality, it can be tough.
All right, let's go to our next topic. Speaking of coaches, Mike Vrabel is the new head coach of the New England Patriots. They made that announcement. I think it was maybe over the weekend, but it's official with Gerard Mayo out. Mike Vrabel in. He's got plenty of coaching experience with Tennessee. He had the year off, and he was with the Cleveland Browns as like I don't even know what the label was, but still. What are your thoughts on Mike Vrabel being the next head coach of the New England Patriots?
Well, from what you read, there's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah.
And some of the players are in for a rude awakening. Because it sounds as though Gerard Mayo's approach was to come in there sort of like the anti-Bill Belichick. Belichick was an authoritarian. He was very demanding. He kind of sucked up all the air in the room. And it sounds like Gerard Mayo went in there in a big collaborative mindset. Like, hey, man, everybody's going to have some say. We're all going to have a role. It was a lot looser in terms of the things that players were expected to do, being on time for meetings, playbook, dealing with the media, all that. And obviously it didn't work out. And here comes Vrabel, who's very Belichickian in his approach. You've already heard one of the offensive tackles, I can't remember which one it was, who played for Vrabel in Tennessee, straight out said, Mike Vrabel is a 4-letter word. But it's exactly what we need, which essentially what he was saying was like, this guy's going to come in and you're not going to like him, but he's going to get results because he's going to hold people to task. And it sounds like that's what they need in New England.
It also seems like this was the plan all along. There are reports that Kraft had been in negotiations with Vrabel, even as the season was concluding. They had thought about giving Gerard Mayo more than a year, but when Vrabel was an option, it was just a matter of hammering out the numbers. He wanted $16 million a year. They wanted 10, and they probably met in the middle. But Vrabel's their guy, and it seems like a good fit. And there are pieces of the puzzle there. We've talked about how much salary cap space they have remaining going into the offseason. They have a quarterback. Some might say they have 2 quarterbacks. Who's the backup from Tennessee, I think, is who he played the last week. Yeah, Milton. I mean, he's a talented guy. He's an athlete. So we'll see what Mike Vrabel can do. I'm not surprised. Sometimes these coaching situations just kind of work their way out that way. But we still have some openings to fill. A lot of these teams and organizations are going to wait until the playoffs are done. So people like Ben Johnson become available to actually sign. So we'll keep tabs on that. But let's finish this up on the final topic with the college football playoffs. They delivered 2 excellent games last week with Notre Dame beating Penn State, Ohio State beating Texas, both very close games. What are your thoughts on the playoffs so far? And should the committee be happy with an Ohio State Notre Dame national championship game?
Oh, man, I don't think the committee could have drawn up one that's better for the sport than Ohio State, Notre Dame. 2 just high-level programs with great histories, massive fan bases, national fan bases. I live in South Jersey. There's tons of Ohio State and Notre Dame fans here, even though those schools are in Ohio and Indiana. It's stylistically, it's going to be a pleasing game, because you're going to have Notre Dame sort of more of their downhill smash mouth style. They have to run the quarterback and try to pound you with a physical defensive front against an Ohio State team that just has a bunch of future NFL guys at the skill positions. It's going to be a really interesting coaching matchup, because here's Marcus Freeman, the young coach at Notre Dame, who's earned a ton of accolades. He's a defensive guy, against Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, who, were seen as offensive gurus for a long time. Ryan Day can't conquer that Michigan hurdle or clear that Michigan hurdle, but now he's got a chance to win a national championship. There's tons of great narratives. I think that while the committee's got a lot to work out moving forward, the way that the first round was designed and the buys and all of that is certainly something they need to look into. Oregon, as the number 1 overall seed, to have their first game at a neutral site against Ohio State, that's a problem. So they got stuff to work out. But ultimately, I think this is shaping up to be a huge success.
Yeah, you want those big name teams. And unfortunately, if you look at the playoffs from a totality perspective, I agree with what you said. Like, these teams that got to buy, every single one of them lost. And you got to think, Penn State gets to play in front of a whiteout at home in their first game. And then these teams that earn a bye, they have to wait. And so this is going to be a very intriguing matchup. The Ohio State offense, Notre Dame, is a little bit more of what I would call a traditional college football team. They like defense. They like running the football. But can we talk about this? Is one of my issues with college football. I just think that sometimes the quarterback play is just so subpar. I'm sorry. Who's the Penn State quarterback? Wouldn't if I saw him on the street. What a horrible decision that was in the semifinal. The pass that was intercepted and led to the Notre Dame field goal to win the game. I mean, and then even if you look at the Texas quarterback, was it Ewers, I think is his name? man, just coach, it's tough. Like they're kids. Well, actually, they're not kids. A lot of these guys are full-grown adults. I don't know. What's your thoughts on the quarterback play so far in the playoffs?
You're right. They're not top profile NFL guys, most likely. I don't think Quinn Ewers is an NFL starter. Drew Aller may wind up being. He's coming back to Penn State for his senior year. I mean, Drew Aller, 6'5" and 240. He's got a rocket arm. He made a bad decision, no doubt. But we've seen NFL guys make those
Sure,
terrible decisions, that whether it's hubris, or just Jameis Winston being Jameis Winston. You see that stuff go on in the NFL. I'm sure that young man would love that throw back. But I think that the NFL and college football are obviously very, very different games. You look at Notre Dame, Riley Leonard, their quarterback. He's as much a running back as he is a quarterback. Their best offense is when Riley Leonard is running the football. And all these teams have great read option schemes. They really invest heavily in the quarterback run game. Next year at Texas, when Arch Manning's there, that guy's a bull as a running back. So they're playing the modern game. And that modern game doesn't necessarily equate to a lot of pretty quarterback play with these guys standing in the pocket and picking apart coverage, etc. But, we're not seeing that from the NFL guys. I mean, Russell Wilson wasn't doing that in Pittsburgh the last month of the season.
I think that's the difference, though. People will talk about, well, man, how's it so tough to find a quarterback? You have all these kids that are coming up from college and they're going into the NFL draft. Well, when they're just, like you said, he's more of a running back. The Notre Dame quarterback, he's more of a running back than he is a quarterback. That's a problem in the NFL. You can be a good runner, but you still have to be able to throw the football. Look at someone like Justin Fields, who people still have questions about his ability to throw the football on a consistent basis with accuracy, going where he's supposed to go with the ball. It's not as easy as people think. And so the college game and the NFL game, while they might be similar and some concepts might be bleeding their way to the professional level, they're not mirrored images. And so I think there's a big gap. Doesn't mean that it's for better or for worse, but I think there's a big gap. But I think that college football, Ohio State, Notre Dame, any of the four teams, though, Coach, they're institutions. If you would have had Texas win or Penn State win, would have been a phenomenal national championship game. And that's
the semifinals.
That's still,
the semifinals was as good as they could have scripted.
Absolutely. So, all right, we want to finish this up with a player profile. It's the man, we'll call him the reader or maybe the thinker. It's AJ Brown, the Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver, who was caught reading a book on the sideline. It looked like he was just nothing going on for me today. I think he had one catch for like 10 yards. I'm just going to sit there and read a book. You want to talk about AJ Brown? Go ahead. I'll let you start.
I do want to talk about AJ Brown reading on the sideline. So AJ Brown was reading a book on the sideline that now some people are reading into it and saying like, oh, well, that was him kind of flipping off Jalen Hurts because Hurts wasn't throwing him the ball. And so he's reading because he's showing his disinterest in the contest. But he brings this book to the bench almost every single week. And it's a book called Inner Excellence, written by a guy named James Palmer. And he's probably made James Palmer a millionaire. Just by, it's like Oprah's book club when she would like mention a book and suddenly it's the number one bestseller on the New York Times. But the passages that he was reading, which they put up and are highlighted, it's all just sort of like self-motivation stuff. And I wonder if that AJ Brown's an emotional guy. He's gotten into it with Jalen Hurts this year. He gets into it with opponents. Is this therapy for him? Is this his way of when I'm feeling frustrated, pull out this book, I read these passages about inner greatness. A lot of it is about patience and your mentality, etc. So, I mean, were we seeing just a guy go through like a personal self-help class on the sideline in the midst of a playoff game? It was fascinating to me. I thought it was one of the most interesting things I've ever seen on a sideline.
Every now and then the cameras will catch something funny, like Baker Mayfield down in a hot dog on the sideline and stuff like that. I mean, you get weird stuff. Jalen Hurts said after the game, he's seen him carry the book around, but he's never seen him actively reading it on the sideline. I think that the only thing that would have been funnier is if he had his feet propped up or something, is just like leafing through the pages, like, that's what it is. Hey, whatever guys need, if a guy was reading scripture on the sideline, would people have an issue with it? No. He's not doing anything that in any way, shape, or form is, he's not ignoring a coach or a teammate because he's reading. It was a downtime for him. The defense is on the field, and he's going through the book, and he's trying to get himself mentally ready. So be it. Good for him. And the fact that he had to go on social media and explain himself like it matters. The team won the freaking game, by the way. It's not like they lost and AJ Brown was reading. That's why they lost. No. Hey, good for him. If that's what gets him focused, gets him keyed in, I have no problem with that whatsoever. We've seen much worse things done on an NFL sideline. We'll put it that
Absolutely.
way. All right, Coach. Hey, go ahead and plug your Call Sheet Daily podcast. We put one of those episodes on the NFL feed every week, but go ahead and plug what you're doing and maybe what's coming up.
Yeah, so tomorrow or Tuesday, actually today, the topic will be the business of the NFL. We do kind of a different theme every day. Tuesday's the new normal, where we look at like new trends in the game, and our theme today will be the business of the NFL, with streaming services now beginning to really take over, or at least make serious inroads in the televising of NFL games. What does that mean for the future of the game? How's that going to change the landscape? My guest is going to be the CEO here, the head honcho at Fans First, Ken Wisniewski, who knows a few things about business. So he's going to be a great guy to talk to about that.
That's going to be great. Make sure you check it out. And make sure you check out all of our work. If you like the Steelers, it's Steel Curtain Network. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can check us out there, or steelcurtainnetwork.com. Coach, that does it. Enjoy the rest of the wild card tonight, the game on Monday night, and then we'll be talking before the division round. Take it easy.